The rain had only just stopped when Olivia Morgan pulled her coat tight around her shoulders and hurried across the parking lot of Seattle Children's Hospital. She was in her mid-30s, a pediatrician who had long ago accepted the chaos of emergency calls, long hours, and endless cases of coughing, feverish children. Medicine was not just a career for her. It was a calling. Every time she knelt by a child's bed and offered reassurance to a frightened entrant, she felt the weight of her own unfulfilled dream pressing more heavily in her chest. Olivia loved caring for children, yet none of them were her own. For 10 years, she had been married to David Morgan. Their wedding photos still hang in the hallway of the Modesto-story house they had bought together on the outskirts of Seattle, when everything had seemed filled with promise. In those early years, Olivia had believed in the same future that most couples dream of. Children filling the house with laughter, birthdays celebrated around a crowded kitchen table, family trips in the summer. But after years of disappointment off doctor's appointments, fertility treats, and heartbreak, those dreams had begun to fade. David had been supportive at first. He sat through every appointment, squeezed her hand when the results came back negative, and reassured her that they were still a family, just the two of them. But over time, his reassurance had softened into resignation. "Maybe it just wasn't meant to be," he would say. "We've treated everything. If it happens, it happens." Olivia knew he had stopped hoping. For him, the absence of children was a misfortune, but not a tragedy. For her, it felt like an open wound that refused to heal. They had spoken more than once about adoption. Olivia had even picked up the paperwork, filing through their requirements that seemed endless: background checks, financial statements, home studies, interviews. But somehow they had never moved forward. There was always something in the way. David's long hours at his auto repair business or Olivia's on-call schedule at the hospital. "Maybe later," David would shrug. "We're still young." But as Olivia passed 35, later felt more and more like never. David had built a respectable business in auto repair, starting with nothing but a rented garage and his skill under the hood. Over the years, he had turned it into a small but successful company that contracted with dealerships across Washington. Olivia admired his drive, the way he could make connections with people, how customers trusted him. But success came with a cost. Had traveled often, sometimes for a week at a time, to handle contracts and authorities, to meet suppliers, or to settle problems with clients. "It's just business," he always said, tossing his duffel bag into the trunk. At first, Olivia accepted it without question. She understood ambition, understood the sacrifices careers demanded. But as the years went on, the absences became harder to bear. Coming home to an empty house after 12-hour shifts at the hospital left her with a loneliness she struggled to ignore. She tried to fill silence with books, with long walks through their neighborhood, with phone calls to her best friend. Yet none of it could replace what was missing. In theater evenings when David was home, he was charming, attentive, even. He would bring back gifts from his trips, an necklace from Portland, a set of fan-made mugs from Spokane. He would kiss her on the forehead and tell her he missed her. And for a little while she would almost believe that everything was fine. But the pattern repeated itself. He left again, and the house sank back into its silence. Olivia sometimes got herself wondering if her longing for children had created the distance between them, if the pressure of failed treatments had driven them apart. She never accused him of anything. Why would she? David had always been good to her, patient, never cruel, and yet something about his trips unsettled her. She dismissed the thought whenever it arose, telling herself she was being paranoid. He worked hard, after all. Someone had to keep the business alive. Her colleagues admired her dedication. Patients adored her. Parents trusted her. Yet, when Olivia returned home at night, kicking off her shoes in the entryway, the quiet seemed to echo louder than the chatter off the hospital hallways. She imagined what it would be like to hear the footsteps of a child rushing toward her, to see drawings taped across their refrigerator door, to feel a small hand slip into hers. That yearning made her love her work all the more. She gave each young patient the kind of tenderness she hoped one day to give her own child. She crouched beside their beds, brushed hair from sweaty foreheads and told stories to distract them from needles and tests. And when parents thanked her, sometimes with tears in their eyes, she smiled and swallowed the ache that rose in her throat. 10 years of marriage had taught Olivia patience, endurance, and the art of hiding her own sorrow behind a professional smile. On the surface, her life looked stable. A successful career, a hard-working husband, a comfortable home. But beneath the surface ran desolate current of unfulfilled dreams, and woven through it all was the pattern of David's frequent trips. Excused as spuseness, accepted without question, and dismissed as unavoidable. Olivia could not know it yet, but those absences were not just business. They were the shadows of another life, running parallel to her own, hidden just out of sight. And soon that shadow would step into the light, unraveling the world she thought she knew. The pager on Olivia Morgan's hip buzzed just after dusk. She had been finishing paperwork at the nursery station when the call came in. A 5-year-old girl, high fever, persistent cough, and shortness of breath, possible pneumonia. Olivia grabbed her coat, signaling to the young nurse on duty to come along. It wasn't technically her shift. She had taken it to cover for a colleague, but duty was duty, and children couldn't wait. The ambulance carried them through slick Seattle streets, the wail of the siren cutting through the evening quiet. Olivia sat in back, running through possibilities in her mind. ASVRV pneumonia, events something more severe. She reminded herself to stay calm. Sometimes the most frightening symptoms in children were the easiest to treat, but sometimes they had something dangerous. The nurse chattered nervously beside her about her own children, about the flu season, about how parents always seem to panic. Olivia listened with half an hour thoughts elsewhere. The apartment building wasn't far from downtown. They climbed 2 flights of stairs before a worried woman opened the door. Amandar looked pale, her hair pulled back hastily, her eyes red from sleeplessness. "Please come in," she urged, leading them inside. The girl lay in a small bed near the window, her cheeks flushed, breath coming in shallow gasps. Olivia immediately crouched down beside her, introducing herself gently. "Hi, sweetheart. I'm Dr. Morgan. Can I listen to your breathing?" Grace blinked at her with watery eyes, clutching a stuffed rabbit close. Amanda hovered anxiously. "She's been sick for a week. The doctor said it was a cold, but it's not getting better today. She can hardly breathe. The fever won't break." Her words tumbled over each other. The panic clear. Olivia placed the stethoscope against Grace's chest, listening intently. Crackles, labored breaths, her brow furrowed. "This wasn't something that could be managed at home. She needs more than we can do here," Olivia said firmly. "We'll admit her to the hospital tonight for observation and treatment. I'll call ahead to the pediatric unit." Amanda pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes wide. "HOs? Oh God. Will she be okay?" "She's strong," Olivia assured her, forcing calm into her voice. "But we need to rule out pneumonia and we'll start antibiotics if necessary. The sooner the better." Amanda nodded shakily, then turned toward the kitchen. "David, can you bring Grace's medical file?" she called, voice trembling. Olivia straightened, glancing toward the doorway, expecting a strong air to emerge. Instead, the world seemed totaled beneath her feet because the man who walked into the room, medical papers in hand, his expression tightening the moment he saw her was her husband. David Morgan froze mid-step. For one suspended second, neither of them breathed. His eyes widened, his jaw clenched, and then forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Amanda looked between them, oblivious. "This is my husband David," she said, relief in her tone, as if the presence of a second parent could somehow study her. Olivia's chest constricted, her stethoscope suddenly around her neck. The puzzle piece fell into place with a sickening clarity. The unexplained business trips, the gifts, the absences. For years, she had wondered but never asked. And no answer stood before her in the form of a man she thought she knew and a family she had never imagined. Her throat burned. She wanted to scream, Toadman answers to collapse. But that child, gasping for air on the bed, anchored her. She forced her face into professional neutrality, nodding stiffly. "We'll need to transfer Grass immediately," she said, her voice clipped but steady. David handed over the folder without a word, his eyes bleeding with hers silently, begging her not to expose him. "Not here, not no." Olivia took it, her fingers brushing his for the briefest moment, and pulled back as if burned. She turned to Amanda, focusing on the young mother's panic instead of her own unrevealing heart. We'll arrange a transport. You'll ride with her and we'll meet the admitting team at the hospital. She'll be in good hands. Grace's small hand tugged at Olivia's sleeve. Will mommy come with me? She whispered. Of course, Olivia said softly, brushing the girl's damp hair from her forehead. And your daddy too? The words nearly choked her, but she forced them out because Grace needed reassurance, not the truth of betrayal. The arrangements were made quickly. Olivia spoke into the phone, giving details to the hospital while Amanda hurried to pack a small bag. David stood off to the side, silent, his presence CV in the room. When it was time to leave, Olivia avoided his eyes. She placed the chart back into Amanda's trembling hands and gave the final instructions to the nurse. She'll be admitted tonight. They'll run tests, start treatment, and keep her comfortable. Amanda clutched her daughter's stuffed rabbit and nodded through tears. Thank you, Summit. Olivia managed a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We'll do everything we can. She stepped out into the hallway, the door closing behind her, and Onlathan did the tears sting her vision. Her hands shook as she gripped the railing off the stairwell, fighting to steady herself. The professional mask had held inside that apartment, but now the weight of it crushed down on her. Her husband had another life, another family, a daughter old enough to mark the years of his betrayal. And all the while he had looked her in the eyes, kissed her cheek, and told her he loved her. As the ambulance pulled away with Amanda and Grace inside, Olivia stood on the curb, her breath clouding in the cold night air. The sound of the siren faded, leaving her in silence. Her world had just split in two, and nothing would ever be the same. The house was dark when Olivia returned. She had driven on atop a lot, the city lights blurring into streaks across her windshield. Her mind replaying the same scene over and over. David stepping through that doorway. Amanda's relieved smile. Grace calling for her parents. Each memory cut deeper than the last. She dropped her keys onto the counter with a clatter and sank into the living room chair. Numb. The wall seemed to close in, filled with photographs that now felt like cruel jokes. Wedding pictures, vacations, holidays celebrated as though their life together had been real. The front door creaked open near dawn. David stepped inside, his shoulders hunched, his steps tentative. He looked less like the confident businessman she knew and more like a man caught in a crime he could no longer deny. Olivia didn't rise. She watched him, her eyes burning with unshed tears, waiting. Finally, he broke Keith's silence. Olivia, he began, his voice. I need to explain. Explain. Her laugh was sharp, bitter. Explain what, David? That you have a daughter? That you've been living another life for 6 years? That while I was crying over fertility tests and adoption forms, you were raising a family across town? David flinched. He lowered himself onto the couch opposite her, burying his face in his hands. I never wanted it to happen this way. I didn't plan it. 6 years in an accident, Olivia snapped. Her voice cracked, but the fury carried it forward. 6 years of lies. 6 years off business trips and excuses. Do you have any idea what that did to me? He lifted his head, his eyes wet. I met Amanda by chance. She brought her car into the shop. We talked. She was kind, and I was lonely, I guess. It started small, I swear, a couple of dinners, and I thought it would end there. But then she told me she was pregnant. With Grace, Olivia pressed her fists against her knees, trying to steady the trembling, and you stayed. You built a second life while pretending this one still mattered. I didn't want to lose you. Hesitated desperately. I still loved you, Olivia. I still do. But I couldn't walk away from my child either. Grace Isman. She needed me. The words hollowed her out. He had said my child so easily when she had spent years longing for the very thing he had found elsewhere. Her voice broke as she whispered, and what about me? What about the nights I cried myself to sleep because I couldn't give you a family? What about the life wetland, the child we were supposed to raise together? Tears blurred her vision, finally spilling over. She had held them back in Amanda's apartment, but now they came in a flood. Her body shook with sobs that seemed to tear from the depths of her chest. David reached toward her, but she recoiled as if his touch might burn. Don't, she choked out. Don't you dare touch me. He withdrew his hand slowly, guilt etched across his face. I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I could keep both lives separate. I thought I could manage it, but I was wrong. I see that now. You thought you could have it with families, Olivia said, her voice cold despite the tears. You thought you could lie to me, lie to her, and somehow keep us both in the dark. But you can't love two women and raise two families with it, destroying them both. You didn't just betray me. You made my whole life, Allie. He bowed his head. Amanda's pregnant again, he admitted quietly. 3 months along, the final blow landed like a stone to her chest. Another child, another tie binding him to the life I had chosen behind her back. For a moment, Olivia couldn't breathe. She stared at him, hardly recognizing the man she had once trusted with everything. Get out, she whispered. David looked up, stricken. Olivia, get out. Her voice rose, trembling with fury and despair. Take your lies, your excuses, your second family, and get out of this house. I can't look at you. I can't breathe the same air as you. He hesitated as if waiting for her torrent, but she didn't. She stood, her face streaked with tears, her body rigid with rage. 10 years, David. 10 years I believed in us. And all the while you were living with someone else. You were a husband in name only. You were never really mine. For the first time in all their years together, he had no defense left. He rose slowly, walked to the bedroom and began gathering his things in silence. Olivia stood rooted to the living room floor, listening to the sounds of drawers opening and closing, the rustle of clothes being stuffed into a bag. Each sound felt like a nail sealing the coffin of their marriage. When he returned to the doorway, duffel bags slung over his shoulder. His face was pale, his eyes haunted. I'm sorry, he said, his voice barely audible. I'll never stop being sorry. She didn't answer. She turned her face away as he left, the door clicking shut behind him. The silence that followed was deafening. Olivia sank to the floor, pressing her hands over her face, sobbing until her body ached. The betrayal was more than an affair. It was a second existence, a life built on the ruins of her own, and she had been blind to it all. In that moment, amidst the wreckage of trust and the ache of 10 wasted years, Olivia knew one thing with brutal clarity. Their marriage was over. The days that followed were a blur. David had packed his bags and left, the echo of the closing door still reverberating through the house long after he was gone. Olivia wandered through the empty rooms, each own heavy with memories now poisoned by betrayal. The silence pressed in until she couldn't bear it anymore. On evening, grief boiling into rage, she stood in the center of the living room, staring at the vase on the table, an old wedding gift she had once treasured. Without thinking, she seized it and hurled it against the wall. The crash rang out like a gunshot, shards scattering across the floor. Something inside her broke loose. She grabbed picture frames, books, anything within reach, and smashed them to the ground. Her cries tore through the air, half scream, half sob. Raw and unrestrained, plates shattered against the kitchen tiles, a lamp toppled, spilling light before flickering out. Years off swallowed pain and buried loneliness erupted in a storm of destruction. When at last her energy gave out, she collapsed onto the couch amid the wreckage, chest heaving, tears streaming. The house that had once symbolized safety and stability was now nothing more than a shell, broken like her marriage. She sat there until dawn, numb, surrounded by the ruins of a life she no longer recognized. A week passed. Olivia returned to work at the hospital, moving through her shifts like an automaton, speaking softly to patients, writing notes, pretending her world hadn't fallen apart. When she came home, the house greeted her with silence and fragments of glass still lodged in the carpet. Then one evening, just as she was about to turn in for the night, the doorbell rang. She opened the door to find David standing there, his face pale, eyes bloodshot. He looked older, as if years had passed in the single week since he had left. Olivia, he began, voice shaking. I wouldn't have come if it wasn't serious. She said nothing, gripping the edge of the door, her body tense. It's Grace, he continued. She's been diagnosed with Adamar. The doctors say she needs surgery. Chemo. It's bad. Live really bad. The words struck her like a blow. Despite everything, she pictured the little girl lying in bed with her stuffed rabbit, cheeks flushed with fever, eyes searching for reassurance. A child who had never asked for any of this. David's voice cracked. The treatments, the hospital stays, it's expensive. Insurance only covers stomach. Amanda and I, we don't have enough. We need money. I need you to agree to sell the house. Olivia stared at him, stunned. You want me to give up the only thing I have left for a child that isn't even mine? Her voice trembled, caught between fury and despair. David swallowed hard, tears gathering. She's my daughter. She's innocent. She doesn't deserve this. Please, Olivia. I know I've hurt you. I know I've ruined everything between us. But Grace, she doesn't have time. She needs every chance to fight. Olivia turned away, pacing through the ruined living room, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. The broken vase lay in pieces still, glinting in the light. Her heart screamed at her to say no, to protect the little she had left. But another voice rose within her, quieter, steadier. She was a doctor. She had sworn to protect children, no matter what they were. And she would not let an innocent child suffer because of her pain. Slowly she looked back at him. Fine, she whispered. I'll sign. We'll sell the house. Relief flooded his face. Thank you. You don't know what this means. Don't thank me. She cut in sharply. This isn't for you. It's for her, for Grace. His shoulders sagged and he nodded. Later that week, the papers were drawn up. Olivia signed them with a steady hand, even as her chest rocked. She watched her name flow across the page, sealing the end not only of her marriage, but of the home they had built together. When it was done, she walked out of the office into the gray cereal drizzle. Clutching her coat around her, the reality settled in with crushing finality. She had lost her husband, her marriage, and now her home. All she had left was her work, her father, and a sliver of resilience buried deep within her. That night, back in the half-empty house, she sat alone in the corner-off bedroom. Tears slid silently down her cheeks, but this time she didn't scream or smash anything. She simply let grief wash over her. Olivia Morgan had nothing left of the life she once knew. And yet, in the silence, in the emptiness, she resolved to keep moving forward. Not because she wanted to, but because there was no other choice. The sale of the house went through quickly, too quickly. One morning, movers carried out the last of her furniture, leaving rooms echoing with emptiness. Olivia stood in the doorway, clutching her bag, realizing she no longer had a home of her own. 10 years of her life, shadow memories and boxes stacked in storage. With nowhere else to go, she drove across town to her best friend's apartment. Rebecca had been by her side since college, the kind of friend who never asked too many questions, but always seemed to know when Olivia needed her. When she opened the door and saw Olivia standing there, pale and weary, she pulled her into a hug with hesitation. You're staying here, Rebecca said firmly, not leaving room for argument. She cleared a corner of the guest room, helped drag in Olivia's suitcase, and made tea as if it were the most natural thing in the world. That night, Olivia sat at Rebecca's kitchen table, the steam from her cup fogging her glasses. She told the whole story, the discovery, the confrontation, the sale of the house. By the time she finished, Rebecca's face was tight with disbelief and anger. You gave up your share of the house, Rebecca asked, incredulous. Liv, that was your safety net. He cheated on you, lied to you, lived a double life 4 years, and you still gave him what he needed. Olivia's hands curled around the mug, the warmth grounding her. It wasn't for him. It was for Grace. She's just a child. None of this is her fault. How could I look at myself in the mirror if I turned away? Rebecca shook her head, her voice softening, but still edged with frustration. You've always been like this, always putting every O'Neill's first. But when are you going to take care of you? You're the one left with nothing, Olivia. No husband, no home, nothing. The words stung because they were true. Olivia felt stripped bare. She had poured everything into her marriage, into her career, and now she was left standing with empty hands. But deep down, she knew she had made the only choice her conscience would allow. I couldn't let her suffer, Olivia whispered. Not when I had the power to help. Rebecca reached across the table and squeezed her hand. I know that's who you are, but promise me you'll think about yourself now. You can't keep giving until there's nothing left. In days that followed, Olivia tried to settle into her friend's home, but that truth knotted her. She was living on borrowed time in borrowed space. Fuels weren't hers. The bed wasn't hers. Even the clothes she pulled from her suitcase felt like they belonged to someone else. A woman who had once believed in a happy marriage. Each morning she put on her white coat and went to the hospital. Going through the motions of being Dr. Morgan, their liable pediatrician, she smiled for prints, soothed frightened children, and offered reassurance she didn't feel herself. When her shift ended, she drove back to Rebecca's apartment where thessalence of her borrowed room reminded her of how far she had fallen. On evening, after finishing another long shift, Olivia sat on the edge of Thebes, staring at the wall. The thought came unbidden, simple and clear. She couldn't keep living like this. Something inside her needed space to heal, away from the constant reminders of what she had lost. Her mind drifted to Spokane, where her father, Charles Porter, lived in a small house on the edge of town. He had retired there years earlier, tending a modest garden, living quietly after her mother's passing. She remembered the peace of visiting him as a child, summers spent by the lake, winters warmed by the wood stove. For the first time in weeks, the memory brought her a flicker of calm. The next day, she walked into her supervisor's office. "I need time off," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "A long leave. I can't keep going like this." Her supervisor studied her face, saw the exhaustion in her eyes, and nodded. "You've given this hospital everything, Olivia. Take the time you need. We'll manage." With the paperwork signed, the decision felt like a weight lifted. She called her father that evening, her voice breaking as she told him she was coming home for a while. Charles didn't ask questions, didn't press for details. He simply said, "Come, live. We'll figure it out together." Olivia hung up the phone, a quiet relief spreading through her chest. She still had nothing. No husband, no house, no certainty of Booth's future. But she had a place to go, a father who would welcome her. And perhaps in the quiet hills of Spokane, she could begin to find herself again. The train ride east felt like a passage into another life. As the skyline off Seattle faded, Olivia watched the world outside transform into rolling hills dusted with snow. Forests of tall pines and fields lying silent beneath winter's weight. By the time she stepped off at Spokane, the air was sharper, colder, carrying the quiet stillness of a small town in December. Her father's old pickup waited at the station. Charles Porter climbed out, his face breaking into a smile the moment he saw her. Age had slowed his step. His hair had thinned and gone gray, but his embrace was as strong as ever. "Liv," he said warmly, holding her close. "You're home." The drive to his cabin wound through snow-covered back roads, the forest pressing close on either side. When they arrived, Olivia felt a tug off Marie. The wooden house sat where it always had, a modest cabin, with smoke curling from the chimney, icicles glittering from the eaves. The porch creaked beneath their boots as they stepped inside, greeted by the smell of fine logs burning in the stove. "Sit," Charles instructed, setting down her bags. "You look exhausted." Olivia sank into the armchair by the fire, her body sinking into the familiar comfort of the cabin. For the first time in months, maybe years, she felt safe. That evening, over stew and bread, she told him everything. The betrayal, the second family, the house she had sacrificed. Charles listened quietly, his weather dance folded on the table. His gaze steady. When she finished, her voice cracking, he reached across and covered her hand with his. "You've carried too much," he said softly, "but you're stronger than you think. Just don't make the mistake of burying yourself in sorrow. You're still young, Olivia. Life isn't over." Tears welled in her eyes. "It feels like it is." He shook his head firmly. "No. You've been hurt, but that don't mean joy won't find you again. The world has a way of surprising us when we least expect it." His words lingered with her as the days passed. The cabin became her refuge. She rose each morning to the sound of crousing from the trees, helped her father chop wood, shoveled snow from Thebes, and found a strange peace in their rhythm of small tasks. Her mind, so long consumed by loss, began to quiet in the stillness. One afternoon, wrapped in a wool coat and scarf, Olivia stepped outside to fetch firewood. The sun hung low, casting long shadows across the snow. As she struggled to lift a heavy log, a voice startled her from across the fence. "Careful there, those things aren't light." She turned quickly. A man stood at the edge of the neighboring property, bundled in a dark coat, his breath misting in the cold. He had kidneys lined with the weight of years, and a face that carried both strength and sorrow. "I'm fine," Olivia replied, adjusting her grip. "Maybe," he said, with a faint smile. "But even the strongest people deserve a hand sometimes." He stepped closer, offering to help. Charles appeared on the porch just then, calling out, "Michael, haven't seen you in weeks. Come say hello." "This is mid-daughter Olivia." Michael Porter crossed the yard, crunching through the snow. He extended a gloved hand. "Nice to meet you, Olivia. I've heard plenty about you from your father." She shook his hand, noting the warmth in his eyes. "All good things, I hope?" "Of course." Charles chuckled. "Michael's been me neighbor for years. Good man." They carried the wood inside together, settling near the fire. Conversation flowed easily, surprising Olivia with its simplicity. Michael spoke of his work as a contractor in town, of the challenges of keeping busy during the winter. He mentioned his divorce quietly in the tone of someone who had learned to live with the scar. Olivia, though hesitant at first, found herself sharing pieces of her own story, not the raw parts, but enough for him to understand she too carried her own wounds. They didn't trade pity. Instead, there was a recognition, an unspoken understanding that life had taken from both of them. The room filled with the soft crackle of fire, the rhythm of voices weaving through the quiet. When Michael finally rose to leave, brushing snow from his coat, he offered a smile. "It's good to have you back in town, Olivia. Sometimes new faces make the winter feel a little less long." After he left, Charles gave his daughter a knowing look. "Good man, that one. He's had his share of heartbreak too." Olivia shook her head quickly. "Dad, I'm not." "I know," he said gently. "I'm not saying anything more, just it's nice to have company." That night, lying beneath the quilt in Harold room, Olivia stared at the ceiling. She wasn't ready for anything new. Her heart was still raw, her wounds still bleeding, but for the first time in a long while, she had felt a spark of connection. Not romance, not yet, but understanding. And in that quiet understanding there was comfort. Thunder deepened outside, snow piling higher against the cabin walls. Inside, Olivia began to breathe again, her pain softening in the presence of her father's steady love and the unexpectance of a neighbor who understood less as well as she did. Winter lingered in Spokane, but the days slowly grew brighter. Olivia found herself settling into a rhythm she hadn't known in years, quiet mornings with her father, evenings spent reading by the fire, and walks along the snow-packed road where the trees bowed heavy with frost. Yet Marine more often, her days in Clydesdale Porter. It started simply. He stopped by to drop off firewood when Charles was out of breath. He brought over jars of preserves his mother had keen years ago, still stored in his basement. Olivia in turn brought him soup when he caught a cold, checked his blood pressure one afternoon when he seemed dizzy. Their lives brushed against each other in small ordinary ways that gradually grew into something steadier. One afternoon, Michael offered to drive her into Spokane Properto look at apartments. "You can't stay with your dad forever," he said, as they passed the frozen river, glinting beneath sun. "You need a place?" That is years she hesitated, fingers twisting in her lap. "It feels like I'll never belong anywhere again. That house in Seattle, it was supposed to be my home. Now it's gone." Michael glanced at her briefly before returning his eyes to Therode. "Home isn't just walls. It's where you choose to build again. I know it don't feel that way right now, but you'll see." The apartment they found wasn't large, but it had a wide window overlooking a quiet street lined with birches. The landlord promised the lilac bush outside would bloom in the spring. Standing there in the empty room, sunlight pooling across the bare floor, Olivia felt a flicker of possibility. For the first time since losing everything, she could imagine belonging again. Michael helped her move in, hauling boxes from her father's truck, fixing the crooked cabinet door, and lying when she struggled with the stubborn lock on the balcony. By the end of the day, they collapsed onto the couch, sharing takeout cartons and trading stories. That night was when Olivia told him the truth. "I can't have children," she said quietly, staring at the carton in her hands. Years of treatments, procedures, nothing worked. Adoption was the only option Weaver considered. And then, well, you know what happened. Michael was silent for a moment, then nodded. "I know how that feels. Different, but the same kind of loss." She lifted her eyes to him, curious. "My ex-wife and I had a son," he explained, his voice low. "Or at least I thought I did. We raised him for 4 years before a medical test showed the truth. He wasn't mine. She'd been unfaithful and she left me soon after. Took the boy with her. I never saw him again." Olivia's heart clenched at the quietash in his words. "I'm so sorry." He shook his head. "I don't tell you this for pity. Just so you know, I understand what it's like to want something, to love a child, and to lose it." A silence fell between them, but it wasn't heavy. It was a silence of recognition, of two lives marked by different wounds yet shaped by the same ache. In the weeks that followed, they grew closer, not through grand gestures, but through steady presence. Michael helped Olivia hang curtains in her new apartment. She invited him for dinner when she experimented with her mother's old recipes.
They walked through the quiet streets talking about small things, sometimes about hard things, never pushing, never rushing. The first hint of spring came with melting snow and birds returning to the trees. On evening, Michael invited her to dinner at a small restaurant in town. Over candlelight and quiet conversation, he reached across the table and took her hand. "Olivia," he said, his voice steady. "I never thought I'd want this again, but with you it feels different. I don't just want to keep each other company. I want us to build something real." Her breath caught, heart quickening. "I know you can't have a children," he continued. "And I can't undo what I've lost. But there are children out there who need families. And together we could give one a home. A full family. Not because we're perfect, but because we understand what it means to long for one." Her eyes filled with tears. The idea had once felt impossible, too heavy, too painful. But hearing it now from him, it felt like hope. Michael squeezed her hand. "Miriam, Olivia, let's make a life together. And let's make room for a child who needs us." She stared at him, overwhelmed by the sincerity in his eyes, by the way he spoke, not of fixing what was broken, but of creating something new. Slowly through tears, she nodded. Yes, the restaurant around them faded into the background. For the first time in years, Olivia's heart lifted, not with the illusion of what she had lost, but with promise of what she could still create. The wedding was quiet, but beautiful, held in a small church not far from Olivia's new apartment. Close friends, a few of Michael's relatives, and her father gathered to witness two people who had both known heartbreak stand together and promised to try again. As they exchanged vows, Olivia felt a steady warmth in her chest. Not rush of youthful fantasy, but the grounded certainty of a second chance. A few months later, after paperwork, interviews, and endless waiting, they received the call that would change their lives. A little boy was ready for adoption. His name was Nikita, 3 years old, with dark hair that stuck up in all directions and wide, watchful eyes. When the social worker placed him in Olivia's arms for the first time, he clung to her shirt with surprising strength, as though he had already decided she was safe. Michael crouched beside them, his hand resting on the boy's back. "Welcome home, son," he whispered. From that moment, their lives shifted. The house filled with new sounds. The patter of small feet, the clatter of toys across the floor, bursts of laughter followed tears and tantrums. Olivia found herself kneeling again and again to tissues, to wipe away crumbs, to soothe the nightmares. Each gesture, no matter how small, filled her with joy. For years, she had opted for this to be called Mom, and when Nikita's small voice finally spoke the word, tentative at first and then with confidence, her heart nearly broke from happiness. Michael embraced fatherhood with equal devotion. Had taught Nikita how to stack blocks into towers, then laughed with him when they toppled. He carried him on his shoulders during walks through the park, pointing out birds and airplanes. On quiet evenings, the three of them would curl up on the couch, the television flicking. Nikita nestled between them. It was simple, ordinary, and perfect. Olivia often caught herself marveling at it all. After so many years of emptiness, after betrayal and loss, she had found a family. Not the one she had imagined in her 20s, but something better, chosen, intentional, deeply cherished. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe in happiness again. Spring came, and with it a sense of renewal. The lilacs outside their apartment bloomed, just as the landlord had promised, their fragrance drifting through the open windows. Nikita toddled off to butterflies in the courtyard while Mitchell and Olivia watched from the balcony, their hands entwined. It was during this season of peace that the unexpected happened. Olivia had been feeling strangely tired, her appetite erratic, small waves of nausea interrupting her days. At first, she dismissed it as stress, as the adjustment of motherhood, but when these symptoms persisted, Michael gently suggested she see a doctor. Sitting in the clinic, Olivia felt a familiar dread. She had spent years in sterile rooms like this, waiting for answers that never came, only heartbreak. When the doctor entered with a smile, Olivia braced herself for the inevitable dipent. But the words that followed left her stunned. "Congratulations," the doctor said warmly. "You are pregnant." For a moment, the room spun. Olivia blinked, certain she had misheard. That's impossible," she stammered. "I was told I couldn't." The doctor shook his head. "It's rare, but not impossible. Infertility isn't always absolute. Sometimes the body surpasses us." Shot gave way to disbelief, then to tears that spilled down her cheeks. She pressed her hands over her stomach as if to shield the miracle inside. A child. Her child, after all the years of longing, of grieving, of telling herself it would never happen. Life had given her this gift. That evening, she told Michael. Hef rose, his eyes wide, searching hers for confirmation. "Are you serious?" He sked, his voice trembling. She nodded, tears still streaming. "I'm pregnant." His hands flew to his face, then dropped as laughter and sobs mingled together. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if he would never let go. "I can't believe it," he whispered into her hair. "After everything, after all we've lost, we're being given another chance." They wept together, overwhelmed by joy, by the impossibility of it all. Michael pressed his hand gently against her stomach, in his eyes. "Our family," he said softly. "It's growing." The months that followed were filled with both exhaustion and anticipation. Michael painted a small nursery. Nikita proudly carried stuffed animals into the room, announcing that his baby brother or sister would need them. Olivia, though nervous, felt stronger than she had in years. Each kick inside of her reminded her that hope had not abandoned her after all. One autumn morning, their daughter was born. As Olivia cradled the newborn against her chest, with Michael by her side and Nikita peeking curiously from feet away, she felt the weight of her journey. Betrayal, loss, sacrifice, a life it had led here to this moment, taught this family. Tears blurred her vision as it whispered to the tiny child in her arms, "You are our miracle." And in that room, filled with warmth and new life, Olivia finally understood. Happiness wasn't about the life she had lost, but about the one she had built from its ashes. The hospital room was quiet, except for the soft whooping of a newborn. Olivia laid back against the pillows, exhausted but radiant, her daughter nestled against her chest. Michael sat beside her, his eyes never leaving the tiny face wrapped in blankets. And near the foot of the bed, Nikita bounced on his toes, peering curiously at his new sister. "Can I hold her?" he asked, his voice a mixture of excitement and awe. "Not yet," Olivia sagely, smiling at him. "Soon, she's still very small." Michael ruffled his son's hair. "You'll be the best big brother. She's lucky to have you." Nikita grinned proudly, hugging his father's arm. For Olivia, the sight was almost too much to bear. Years of longing, of despair and betrayal, had led her here into a moment so tender it felt like a dream. She pressed a kiss to her daughter's forehead, whispering silently her gratitude for this improbable gift. The months that followed were a whirlwind of sleepless nights and small miracles. Olivia and Michael moved through them together, taking turns rocking the baby, cheering as Nikita adjusted to his role as protector and playmate. Their apartment, once quiet, now rang with laughter, cries, and the chaos of family life. It wasn't perfect. There were nights when exhaustion threatened to break them. Mornings Hoenies littered the floor and dishes piled high. But to Olivia, it was everything she had ever wanted. She carried her daughter on her hip while stirring soup, held Nikita's hand as they walked to Thepperk, and leaned on Michael's steady presence when doubts crept in, sometimes in rare, quiet moments. Her thoughts drifted to David. He no longer haunted her with anger or longing. Instead, he lingered as a shadow of a past life, a chapter she had closed. One afternoon, while the children napped, she answered an unexpected call. David's voice came through the line, strained but civil. He updated her briefly. Grace was stable, responding well to treatment and remission for the time being. Amanda had given birth to a healthy baby boy. Olivia listened, her heart steady. I'm glad to hear that, she said simply. Truly, I wish them well. There was an awkward pause, as though David expected more accusations, bitterness, or even nostalgia, but Olivia offered none. She had no space left for resentment. Her life was full now, filled with people who loved her and needed her. They ended call politely. To people tied on Libby the memory of what had been. That night, after tucking Nikita into bed and nursing her daughter back to sleep, Olivia stood by the window, gazing out at the quiet Spokane street. Snow fell softly, blanketing the world in white. She thought of Grace, of Amanda, of Philboy born into that family. She whispered a silent blessing for them, a hope that the two would find peace. Michael came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. You okay? He murmured against her hair. Yes, she whispered, leaning into him. More than okay. He kissed her temple, and together they stood in silence, watching the snowfall. As the years passed, their family grew into its rhythms. Nikita thrived in school, protective and kind toward his younger sister, who grew into a spirited child with Olivia's eyes and Michael's smile. The apartment became too small, so they bought a modest house with a yard where the children could play under the lilac bushes. Olivia's career shifted as well. She returned to the hospital part-time, balancing her work with motherhood. Each day, she was reminded of her calling to help children. But she no longer felt the old ache of emptiness. She returned home to a family that filled the spaces once left hollow. Sometimes late at night she reflected on the path that had led her. The betrayal had nearly broken her. The loss of her marriage, her home, and the life she thought she had built had left her stripped bare. Yet from that devastation had come clarity. She had learned that endings, however brutal, could open doors to beginnings she had never imagined. Looking at her children asleep in their beds, Olivia felt no bitterness, only gratitude. She had not been defeated by loss. She had been reshaped by it. Her life was not one she had planned, but it was the one she had needed. And as she held her daughter close one evening with Nikita's slaughter echoing from the yard and Michael's hand warm and hers knew the truth with absolute certainty. Sometimes loss is the very soil from which happiness grows.